In this video, we cut slots for the fins, epoxy them in, and place them. I think that this project's about done. There's a few more details that we'll follow up in the future, like adding a vent and a leash plug, but for the most part, I think this one's done. So I'm just looking here for the center of the board. I decided I'd like to have the fins mounted a foot from center and a foot from the back. Totally random positioning, but it seemed to be a pretty good spot just from a visual perspective. And then measuring 1 foot to either side of the center. Using my square, I then measure a foot up, and I want to make sure it's not off at an angle. Now I'm making another mark for the length of the fin. I figured a slot about a 1/2 inch wide would work pretty well. Give the epoxy enough foam to bite into so that the fins would be in there solid. So I marked out the boxes I wanted to cut out and colored them in. That way when I do my routing, there would be no question where I wanted to cut. Using this plain round router bit, I start cutting out just to the mark. There is no kind of guide or anything like that. As I wanted a deeper slot, I lowered the router bit in the router and recut. The shaft of the router bit acted as a bit of a guide. Of course, the bottom of the hole, or the slot, was a little bit wider than the top, but that was probably a good thing. Even so, the fin still stuck out of the board too much. So I measured and went ahead and cut a little bit of the bottom of the fin off. I got the fins placed as I wanted and used some styrofoam blocks to hold them perpendicular to the board. I just taped it into place and then filled the slots with epoxy. Of course, pouring it right into that small slot wasn't so easy. I just used my handy scraper to get as much of it into the slot as possible and spread the rest of it across the surface of the board. After 2 or 3 pours, I was able to get the surface of the epoxy up to the surface of the board. And here's the final result. Taking this for a quick test, I'm seeing that the volume of the board is probably as small as I could have made it. Anything smaller in this would have been a submarine, not a SUP. But once the board starts moving through the water, the fins really grab really nicely. I think they worked out really well. Also, the board seems reasonably fast. Not bad for a dirty old man. After the quick test, I took the board out for a longer paddle. I was out for an hour and a half, and it really performed very nicely. I kind of wish that I made it a little bit bigger, but it's certainly big enough. It works nice. Thanks for viewing, and we'll get started on the next project.